The Marvels is the latest installment into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I just checked it out tonight, and I've got my spoiler-free thoughts right now. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the latest theatrically released film that's part of the MCU, and that film is called The Marvels. Directed by DaCosta, who wrote this film alongside Megan McDonnell and Alyssa Karasik. This film stars people like Brie Larson, Teyonah, Parris, Iman, Vellani, Samuel Jackson, Zawe Ashton, and many, many more. And before we get too far into this, I'd like to say a big thanks to those kind folks over at Disney and Marvel for sending me over an invite to check this out for a press screening just a little bit ahead of its release in theaters for the general public. Very happy to be able to check out a Marvel movie in theaters early. This was the first time I've ever been able to do so, and that's pretty awesome in and of itself. I'm very grateful to all of you who continually support the channel so that I was able to make this a reality in my life. When I heard The Marvels was going to be a movie, I was pretty excited because outside of a couple of supporting characters and some small threads of storylines that have kind of shown up in some of the movies from some of the series on Disney Plus, there hasn't been an abundance of crossover. I think one of the biggest criticisms that people have of the MCU after Endgame is that there's so much to watch, whether it be the movies or the shows, and while some things have been big successes with the fans like Shang-Chi or Spider-Man No Way Home, or even series like Loki or WandaVision, there's been a lot of other things that have come out that have either been a mixed bag or very negatively received by a lot of fans. And thankfully for me, if you've been following this channel, you know I'm a huge nerd. I grew up reading these comic books, I grew up playing the video games, I grew up watching the cartoons, and it's always just been a dream to have a huge live action cinematic universe that we currently do have. And more often than not, I can find more positive than negative in most installments that they've released since Endgame, with most of them all being movies that I at least enjoy, and most of the series I feel similarly, even if I don't love all of the things that have been released. And I think the biggest issue that we've had up to this point is cohesion. I think one of the biggest things people want to see with these movies is all of this stuff coming together, which is what made the earlier phases of the MCU so important. So here we are now with The Marvels, that once again brings Brie Larson back to the front as Captain Marvel. This film serves as not only a sequel to Captain Marvel, but also a follow-up to WandaVision, as we're reintroduced to the character of Monica Rambeau, once again played by Teyonah Parris, who does a fantastic job in this movie once again alongside Brie Larson. And then of course the biggest kind of nice surprise to finally see amongst the actual movie cast is Iman Vellani as Ms. Marvel, or of course her real name, which is Kamala Khan. And so yeah, I was really excited to see what this movie was going to be all about. The trailer seemed like a good, fun popcorn film, and I'm happy to say I enjoyed this film. But I will be honest in saying that I didn't love the film, and we're going to get into why in just a little bit. But of course, like I mentioned, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, so you guys don't have to worry about anything here. One thing that I was happy to see about this movie as it started to pick up was that a lot of the stuff you see in the trailer is in the first act. And while there are some things that you see in the trailer that are in some of the later acts of the film is primarily marketed around that first act, which allows there to be some surprise to some degree for the things that come later on. With that said though, the base premise of this film, without getting too deep into spoilers, is that these three have come together because of a specific event that's happened in space that causes their light abilities to actually be mended and to be intertwined. Now every time that they each individually use their powers, they are swapping places and teleporting to where the other one is, and a lot of times putting them in very dangerous situations. This made for a lot of great moments of humor, as well as some really epic moments of action where the three characters can be in completely different places on completely different planets and are consistently bouncing between these different locations and in and out of their own individual conflicts because of the fact that they have this intertwined power set. Outside of that, you have the main villain of the film, which is Darwin, played by Zawe Ashton, who is the ruler of the Kree people and has a vendetta specifically against Captain Marvel, and is now, like a lot of villains that we've seen in a lot of MCU projects and comic book movie projects in general, or just villain stories that we've seen before, is now willing to do everything and anything possible to save her people. And that's the base general premise. And you have these three characters that kind of have to learn to work alongside one another. They have to learn to kind of deal with this whole situation where their powers are intertwined and anything that they do will cause them to change places. They have to learn to fight with each other, use their powers to their own advantages, while they're also kind of playing off of the storylines that we saw in things like WandaVision, Captain Marvel, and Ms. Marvel. And I think some of the most heart of the film when it comes down to character work specifically comes between the character of Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, as well as Teyonah Parris's character, who this is the first time she's actually interacting with Brie Larson, Monica Rambeau. Of course, her character was a young girl in Captain Marvel and has a bit of a kind of nasty taste in her mouth when it comes to Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel was this hero to her when she was a young girl, and of course Captain Marvel would end up leaving. Her mom of course passed away during the events of the blip, which of course we saw on WandaVision. And so since they haven't seen each other since, there is a bit of some growing pains between the two of them as they're reunited in this situation that has really literally intertwined them. And then you have Kamala Khan in the mix, who's just a fan of the idea of being a part of any superhero team, but most notably Captain Marvel. And there's a lot of great fun humor between the three of them, as well as some heartfelt moments, and I really thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think one of the things that I enjoyed the most as well is that you do have two characters that have been through some heartbreaking situations, like Carol Danvers and Monica Rambeau. And now Kamala Khan, while she is excited to be a part of a superhero team, has to kind of recognize that there's a lot of sacrifices that come with this idealistic lifestyle that she has in mind. Beyond that though, if I had to really talk about what I didn't like about this film, it would genuinely be that it felt at a certain point in the second act that it was far more about jokes at times than it was narrative. And that's not to say that there aren't great moments of the story throughout the course of the film, but I really genuinely personally felt that the first act of the film was the strongest story-wise, and while these three characters are trying to figure out what they're doing with their powers, I found like that was really the most interesting and most exciting part of the film. The middle section of the film is filled with plenty of great action that I really enjoyed, utilizing great set design, great costume design, and tons of big visual effects that you come to expect from these movies. And outside of a couple of moments of some weak green screen, as well as some moments where some of the CGI wasn't maybe as good as other moments in the film, ultimately I found the film looked really good. And so a lot of these action sequences do look great. They're a lot of fun to watch. They're very exciting. They're energetic. And ultimately, I genuinely was really entertained when it came to the action, as well as the great musical score that accompanies this film that's given to us by Laura Karpman, who actually did the musical score for things like Ms. Marvel, as well as What If. And so, yeah, you know, I really enjoyed it as a popcorn film, but at a certain point, I did feel like there was an element of this film that was far more leaning into it being jokey and kind of having these moments that were meant to try to make you laugh, which has been a consistent thing we've seen in a lot more modern MCU installments. They've always had humor, but I have found that a lot of the more modern MCU things have leaned a little bit more on the humor, depending on the project, of course. And this film definitely had a lot of that going on, with characters like Nick Fury, who just came out of the pretty dark and dramatic events of Secret Invasions, pretty much being relegated to a lot of comedic moments in this film. I enjoyed seeing Samuel L. Jackson once again as Nick Fury, but oftentimes felt that he was really just mainly relegated to humor more so than actual story progression. However, what I will say though is that I found the last 20 to 30 minutes of this film to be really solid. The film is actually not that long, to be honest. It's only an hour and 45 minutes, which is pretty short when you think of the MCU. It's a pretty easy breezy film that feels like it comes to an end fairly quicker than you maybe would like it to, but also doesn't overstay its welcome. I found it to be an entertaining, just straightforward popcorn film that does a lot of fun things with these characters, has some nice heartfelt moments that play off of those other stories that I mentioned, reintroducing characters from those various stories that I mentioned, and most notably as well sets up for some pretty amazing things. Because what I'll say here is that for whatever this movie lacked in character depth and story and in villain and the stakes at times, the last 20 minutes or so I thought was really great, not only in the action sense, but also in what it's doing for the setup of the future of the MCU. The final moment of this film I found was really exciting, put a big smile on my face, and I think kind of like, you know, perked me up a little bit for maybe some of the things I didn't love about the film before that. There's a moment in the middle of the film that has to do with a bit of a musical number that I'm still not sure how I feel about the film. But by the time we got to the end, I can genuinely say they put a smile on my face with the way that the film ended. And most notably, and I'll end this review with this, the mid-credit scene. There's only one post-credit, mid-credit scene. There's no scene at the very end of the credits, just one in the mid-credit. It was pretty awesome. It put a huge smile on my face, and I think long-time Marvel Comics fans and just fans of the MCU are going to be having a really good time at the theaters this weekend just with that post-credit scene. It was one of my favorite mid-credit scenes we've gotten in a movie in a while, just for the excitement that it brings me for what's to come. Again, I didn't love everything about this film, but I enjoyed it. I found it to be a good, fun popcorn film that had some great action, some great visuals, some great performances throughout, some moments that didn't land as well, some things I wish were a little bit more emotional, some stakes that I wish were a little bit more present, and a villain that I wish was not as generic as it was. This wasn't a perfect or top-tier MCU film, but it does have some really, really great moments. And I think if you're just looking forward to just sitting down, eating some popcorn, drinking some soda, and just enjoying a good popcorn film with some superheroes kicking ass, there's plenty of fun to be had here, even if you didn't love everything. And I also say that recognizing, though, that as I was watching the film, I could tell that there is going to probably be a percentage of the audience who may not like this film. I think that there is going to be people who are not going to like this film, depending on your taste. And while I do think there was a lot that really worked for me, I do recognize, because I was put off by some of the humor and some of the lack of depth in certain moments of the story, that there are going to probably be people in the audience that maybe didn't like it as much as I did, but I found it to just be a good, fun popcorn film, genuinely. So I'm going to stop rambling now. Definitely go check out The Marvels. I think it's definitely worth watching. I had a good time checking it out in the theaters. Again, not top tier MCU, but a good time nonetheless. So definitely leave your thoughts down below. Are you looking forward to The Marvels? And if you were coming back to this review after the movie has already come out and you've already seen it, let me know down below. Did you like the movie? Did you not like the movie? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.